like to ask the Leader of the Council to say a few words on behalf of all of us. Over to you, Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know the Chief Executive likes excessively fawning speeches, but I've tried to tone it down slightly. So Peter joined us 5 years ago, and what a tremendous transformation has occurred in those 5 years, from being an authority that, quite frankly, was staring over the financial precipice to now one of the most robust and financially stable authorities in our region. And we should be very grateful to Peter for all of the work that he put in to make that happen, and vitally working incredibly constructively throughout with members of this council of all political hues. And I think what makes Peter more than a good chief executive and has made him a great chief executive is that he not only understands the member role, but he understands members' desires and aspirations, that important elected element that makes councils councils rather than agencies of national government. And Peter's always been a great champion of that and incredibly successful in the past as well as here at Reading. And I know that my predecessor, Councillor Jo Lovelock, will often say that one of her greatest achievements as leader was the appointment of Peter. In fact, so distraught was she by your departure that she was unable to be here this evening. So Peter, we hope that you have a very successful future, and I know that you intend to take up a sort of mentoring role in the sector, and I'm sure you'll relish the opportunity that comes with it, and we wish you all the very best for the future, and thank you for all of the work that you've done here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brock. I'm sure that we all very much agree with the sentiments that Councillor Brock has expressed, and you'll be very much missed, but we understand that the brighter future of retirement and other opportunities beckons. So thank you so much, Peter. Moving on to the rest of the agenda, we have apologies for absence this evening from Councillors Kitchenham, McElroy, Mitchell, Lovelock and Hacker. Councillor Barnett-Ward is unable to attend due to illness but is dialing in remotely. Hello, Councillor Barnett-Ward. Oh, and Councillor Mitchell, sorry, I had your apologies, but I didn't see you were there.
I apologise for being here, but
well, we should never apologise for not resigning and turning up, unlike the cabinet.
We're all still here.
We're all still here. Yes, good. Well, we have a strong and stable council here, I think, don't we? So moving quickly on from that to declarations of interest. Are there any? No, I wasn't made aware of any. We have meetings which were held on the 25th of May, both the AGM and the special meeting. Can I sign those minutes as a correct record? Thank you. We have no petitions and no public questions, so we move on to councillor questions. And councillor question 1 is from Councillor Cresswell, who has a question to ask Councillor Page.
Good evening. Reading is unfortunately very highly polluted. Green councillors are concerned that much of Reading exceeds 3 World Health Organization air pollution limits, PM2.5, PM10, NO2. Air pollution causes asthma, reduces lung development in children, and is an invisible killer. Please can the lead councillor update me on what is being done in the near future to tackle this problem and quantify the difference each measure mentioned is expected to make?
Thank you, Councillor Cresswell. Councillor Page to respond, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I apologise for the draft not having been expunged from this? I thank Councillor Cresswell for his question. In common with most other towns and cities in the UK, Reading has relatively high levels of pollutants such as nitrogen oxides and dioxides and particulate matters that exceed New World Health Organization guidelines. These all have to be looked at in context. It's worth noting that the very recent Central Office of Public Interest data shows that 97% of the UK exceeded at least one of the WHO targets and 3 in every 4 of UK addresses exceed all 3 air pollutants. So whilst we will strive locally to achieve these levels, we cannot do this in isolation, and without proper central government commitment, we are regrettably still some way off being able to achieve them. The WHO air pollution figures referred to by Councillor Cresswell are very ambitious guidelines, but are not binding. Indeed, last September, the WHO sharply reduced its guideline limits, reflecting the increasing scientific evidence of the harm to health caused by toxic air, and Councillor Cresswell rightly references that in his question. Because the WHO recognises that these guidelines are not currently achievable in a lot of the world, they also published a set of interim targets to recognise that there would need to be incremental moves towards the guideline values, which is what we will be doing. In fact, the Council's air quality monitoring shows that none of the air quality objectives were exceeded in 2021. However, I would acknowledge that this was a year of COVID-interrupted lockdowns, and we must therefore not be complacent. It is obviously important that we continue to tackle levels of pollution with further measures to help protect the health of local residents. The Council is fully committed to maintaining and improving air quality across the town as we work towards our ambition of a net zero carbon Reading by 2030. We continue to build on the progress made to date by consulting on and introducing measures to reduce transport emissions and encourage realistic alternatives to the private car in Reading, particularly for shorter journeys. The council-owned Reading buses continues to outperform most other bus companies in the UK, and we have received provisional funding of 26 million to take forward elements of our bus service improvement plan. We are one of the first dozen highway authorities outside of London to be designated for new powers to enforce moving traffic offences like blocking yellow box junctions, for example, which also contributes to poor air quality and congestion. In addition to the above, in the next year, Reading Borough Council plans to finalise our Reading Transport Strategy, also known as the Local Transport Plan, once new guidance has been received from the Department for Transport. We will consider within that options for a charge on all cars and lorries that conduct no business in Reading but use our roads as a rat run between various parts of the motorway network, thereby causing additional congestion and air pollution. We'll complete the review of the Air Quality Action Plan, which will refresh and reprioritise actions taken to improve air quality in the borough. We'll introduce electric vehicle charge points for taxis near to the town centre to encourage the uptake of EVs by the taxi fleet. We'll complete the EV strategy, which will enable us to facilitate and encourage the use of electric and zero-emission vehicles in Reading. We'll progress our active travel fund schemes on Shinfield Road and Bath Road, which will deliver permanent high-quality segregated cycle routes. Open our new town centre cycle hub underneath the Primark headquarters. Deliver the new Green Park train station this month and await its commissioning and then opening by Network Rail later this year. Complete the first phase of the regeneration of Reading West Station and utilise our capability fund to deliver more bicycle training, maintenance workshops and employ our active travel officer to promote more active travel in our local schools. All these projects will help to improve air quality in Reading by providing good alternatives to the private car and encouraging people to use more sustainable modes of transport. The precise amount that each will contribute to reducing air pollutants is almost impossible to quantify. But I'm sure we all recognise that no single measure is the answer, and it's therefore essential to continue introducing as many initiatives as possible so that the combined impact adds up to a significant reduction in air pollution and improved public health in Reading. I would conclude by making the obvious point that without more concerted and effective action by central government, what's left of it, our actions locally will be undermined. I therefore welcome the latest report by the Climate Change Committee, which sets out in its 650 pages a raft of recommendations to all government departments, which, if implemented, would reinforce the measures we are planning at a local level. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Councillor Page, for that comprehensive and to-the-wire answer in terms of time. Question 2 is, oh, sorry, are there any supplementaries? Oh, I did, sorry.
Thanks for that. 2021 was a good year, but the PM 2.5 target was exceeded on Monday this week. But my supplementary is more about targets. So the Council's air quality targets are, as you say, weaker than WHO, and they match the English national targets, although not the Scottish, which are more stringent. So my question is the Council free to set more ambitious targets than those set by the Westminster government?
We are obviously able to do that, and within the review of the Air Quality Action Plan and the associated plans I've referred to, we will be reviewing all those figures. So obviously I'm not going to give a commitment at this stage, but the short answer to your question is yes. And if it's possible to be more ambitious, then we will. And we will set out in our plan our thinking and our proposals later this year.
Thank you, Councillor Page. We now move to question 2, which is Councillor White to ask the Leader of the Council a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is on welcoming Ukrainian refugees to Reading. Many Reading residents have shown amazing generosity and provided care and sanctuary for Ukrainian citizens fleeing Putin's brutal war. Please can the lead councillor update Green councillors and others about how many Ukrainians we have welcomed, the support that is being provided, and the main support challenges being faced.
Thank you, Councillor White. Councillor Brock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As of the 28th of June, 131 guests, which is composed of 62 family groups. Sterile terminology, I know, but it is the terminology used within the scheme, so I thought it best to render as such here, have arrived in Reading under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. An additional 2 guests have arrived in Reading after being rematched from another borough. Following the government's guidance on the Homes for Ukraine scheme, the council is conducting property inspections and safeguarding visits to ensure that the accommodation is of a suitable standard and that guests are safe. This is being carried out by our environmental health team, adult social workers and Brighter Futures for Children social workers. We also provide assistance with school placements, information about the local area, and issue the resettlement payments of £200 per individual and the £350 payments for sponsors. The council have also arranged the following support. We've provided grant funding to set up the Reading Ukrainian Advice Centre, or RUAC, wonderful facility. I was there with yourself, Madam Mayor, at the opening, which is a centralised hub which provides support to Ukrainian guests and their sponsors who would like to access information and advice on a variety of services such as benefits, health, education, jobs, housing, consumer rights, immigration and well-being. The RUAC is run by Citizens Advice Reading in partnership with the Reading Ukrainian Community Centre, located on the 3rd floor of Reading Central Library, and accepts appointments Monday to Friday 10 till 3. The RUAC services are available for all Ukrainian refugees, regardless of the scheme they arrive through. As of the 25th of June, 122 clients have used these services, with the majority, 65, coming from Reading, but some have come from other areas such as West Berkshire, 15, Wokingham, 9, South Oxfordshire, 7, Bracknell Forest, 3, Windsor and Maidenhead, 3, Vale of White Horse, 1, Westminster, 1, and East Hampshire, 1, and a few others from areas that we were unable to determine. We are working on creating a comprehensive guide of all services available for Ukrainians. This guide is available in English, Ukrainian and Russian. It is distributed to the sponsors and their guests by email or via the RUAC. It will be made accessible on the council website. We're also collaborating with the NHS, Home Office, Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, or DLUC, Department for Work and Pensions, and around 20 organisations from charitable groups to seek redress of a variety of concerns, including emerging issues, and look at a coordinated approach to those issues. 2 specific emerging needs are 1, the distribution and administration of clothing and basic supplies, and 2, social and educational opportunities for teenagers with added well-being support, especially for the school holidays. A 90-day free bus pass is provided to refugees who arrive in Reading under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. This is in line with our provision for others for whom the council has a responsibility under government schemes to provide support to refugees, the so-called UK resettlement schemes. As of the 28th of June, the council has already distributed 127 bus passes to 85 adult guests and 42 children. The network bus passes cover all Thames Valley buses and Reading buses services, which is useful for children who go to school beyond the Reading zone. Brighter Futures for Children is helping with school admissions and has allocated 35 places to families under the Homes for Ukraine scheme. And the Homes for Ukraine group, or HUG, is composed of representatives from different teams in the council and was formed to help the coordination work. HUG meets every Monday to discuss issues and updates and provides a single point of contact within the council to try and resolve any issues as quickly as possible. Some support challenges we have encountered are specifically two. Firstly, the rematching of sponsors and guests in the case of a breakdown of relationship between the guest and the sponsor, or if the accommodation and safeguarding checks find a match that is not suitable. The council has the responsibility to rematch the guests with another sponsor. Free rematches under the scheme have already been made. We ensure that rematching concerns are resolved as quickly as possible to avoid families and individuals needing to present as homeless. We encountered initial issues on welfare and safeguarding checks in advance of arrival, as well as trying to balance our capacity to undertake checks and provide support whilst having to work through issues from both the sponsors and the guests. There are still a number of ongoing issues, but we try to address them as best we can. Although the government has continued to update its guidance for councils under the Homes for Ukraine scheme, it remains vague in some respects. There is a need for clarity on the role of councils in supporting integration and securing access to accommodation at the end of sponsorships. Recognition of the pressures caused by the wider asylum and resettlement context is also required. Principally, the future housing needs of guests is beginning to emerge as a key issue when the first 6-month sponsorship period comes to an end. We are waiting for policy updates from government on this, but in the meantime, we are looking at how we can increase the level of support to guests to help them find their own accommodation when the initial sponsorship period finishes. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brock. I used my discretion to allow you to complete your answer because I do think it was an important one. Are there any supplementaries?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor White. Thank you, Councillor Brock. That concludes questions from councillors for this evening. We will now move on to the next item of business, which is a motion to be moved by Councillor Mpofu-Coles for the Fair Tax Declaration. I invite you to move, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody. As a member of the Labour and Cooperative Party, fair tax is no doubt the most urgent important issue, as there is need for companies or contractors to pay for their fair share without avoidance so that communities benefit. As a recipient of public fund, our council has to commit to be exemplary and transparent in ethical, fairer tax regulations across all their suppliers, contractors and service providers. Our council has an annual estimated budget of 140 million and not only requires monitoring, but making sure that there's transparency and accountability through demanding to know all the links of the businesses or organization or contractors that provide service to the council. Fair tax is not only about paying tax, but also about making sure that tax policies, planning and procurement are in place to reduce tax avoidance so that there is a fair redistribution of income. Then it reaches the most needed in our society to create better opportunities. Unfortunately, the high taxation has made wealthy individuals and companies richer by increasing investing their profits in offshore accounts and tax avoidance. The UK has 17 billion per annum lost corporative tax. One of the things I would like to mention is about what Action for Children states if we have avoidance of tax. That there is, even before the pandemic, 4.3 million children in the UK were living in poverty in the UK. Up to 500,000 over the past 5 years has been lost, totaling to 31% of children. In Reading East, Between 2019 and 2020, 23% of children, which is 5,072 children, were in poverty. In Reading West, where I am a councillor in Weekly Ward, 27%, which means 6,267 children were in poverty. And I live in one of the wards in which income does not filter to the families. The current Tory government has been discontented in the way they are tackling the fair tax, as many of their cronies benefit from the tax haven. Taxation is pushed higher for hardworking people and those already disenfranchised in our society have been harshly affected by the economy. Their quality of life is getting worse. Hardworking families are feeling the pinch with rising prices and food, yet they are told to pay more tax by the Tory government, even after scrupulous contracts were awarded during the COVID pandemic. Labour is calling for contracting through greater transparent accountability and ethical sourcing too. As a council, we should call upon the current government to push for a robust procurement law that does not continue to benefit those who are rich and leave the rest struggling even to be able to meet their basic needs. Fairer tax helps for services needed in our town. Hence, our council must ensure that the IRF 35 is implemented robustly and contractors pay a fair share of their taxes. As a Labour Council, we are proud to have committed to paying a living wage, and we should be proud to stand up for a fairer tax. It is a responsible taxation, and I urge all councillors to support this motion as it stands up for values, inclusive economy, and responsibility that benefit our society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Lanzoni, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I hope, fellow councillor, you all appreciate the irony of an Italian seconding a motion about tax evasion and tax elusion. But, you know, all over Europe, the United Kingdom is famous for the strength and stability of its government, and we may not have one by the end of my speech. So we live in unprecedented times, fellow councillor. The aim of the government in any liberal democratic state is the safeguard of its citizens' freedom to realize their talents and passions. In order for a government to keep its citizens free and at the same time to enable them to chase their talents and passions, a government has to provide services, education, health, infrastructures, police, justice. To provide such services, a government has to raise taxes, that is, to curtail its citizens' freedom by forcibly subtract a portion of their income from them. This conundrum, namely subtracting from citizens a portion of their income in order to safeguard their freedom to spend the remaining part as they want, is at the basis of each liberal democracy, and it is one of the most discussed problems in political science. There is no matter impacting the core of our democracy, therefore, more than taxation. And this is the reason why I have at heart the motion we discuss today. If tax needs be, it needs to be fair. But what is fair taxation? It goes without saying that everyone should contribute to the cost of the services they benefit from. And you all will agree with me, I believe, in saying that this applies to every legal entity, not only individuals, but also businesses. Businesses, in fact, benefit from public services in a way which is different and additional to the way their employees and their director do. And when reflecting about how individuals and businesses benefit from taxation and public services, I could not help noticing an intrinsic difference. When we consider individuals, it is typical the most productive and wealthy ones which contribute to taxation through progressive tax rates, while the most marginalized and poor people in our societies are those typically benefiting the most from public services, as it is fair and right. And this is so true that every now and again in all countries, the idea of cutting taxes to the most productive and wealthy citizens is proposed and reproposed by individuals misunderstanding, from my point of view at least, liberalism and its purposes. Some even arrive to excuse tax evasion and elusion, which is statistically more significant in the richest groups, by the fact that taxes for them are higher. When we come to businesses instead, the situation appears to me to be quite different. As it happens with individuals, it is still the large and wealthy corporations who are more likely to be able to afford and to use tax avoidance scheme, tax havens, offshore tax dodging, whatever is known as tax evasion and tax elusion. Yet, one could say that large corporations actually benefit from public services even more than small and medium enterprises. Corporate tax avoidance is a serious concern for our residents when it comes to business conduct. The government and local council should consider a company's ethic and how they pay their tax when awarding contracts. I think we all agree on that. Almost 1 in 5 public contracts in the UK have been won by companies with links to tax havens. If fair taxation is at the core of our country, then this has to change. This has to change, and it has to change now, to keep our country together, to keep delivering good and strong public services. If we want taxes to be low for everyone, we need everyone to pay their fair share of taxes, including large corporations. And I personally want Reading Borough Council to be at the front of this change. I want us to lead by example and to demonstrate good practice in our tax conduct, and to support calls for urgent reform of UK procurement law. And this is why I'm proud to second the motion moved by Councillor and Dr. Alice Mbofu-Coles, and to commend it to my fellow councillor of every group in the chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lanzoni. A very effective maiden speech, if I may abuse my position as chair. I have Councillor Williams next.
Let's try that again. All right, what is this one working? Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and my thanks to your fellow Whitley councillor for putting this before us tonight. It was really good to hear her passionate words this evening. Residents face the year ahead with a constant nightmare of financial fear, of choosing between rising food bills and soaring energy bills. Many will fall into debt through no fault of their own, with a government led by someone who borrows £50,000 for wallpaper, offering a few £100s to people who are going to have to borrow just to survive. And whilst people in Reading struggle to pay bills, some companies, as my colleague on the Labour benches has just beautifully described, are wriggling around trying every trick they know to avoid paying their fair share of tax. Tax contributions are a key element of what's positive about business. It's not just economic, it's also social. Tax helps the communities in which businesses operate so that government, national and local, can deliver vital public services and build the infrastructure that means those very businesses can thrive. Green councillors will be happy to support this motion, Chair. We need funding, sustainable funding for social good, for investments in people and the planet. After COVID, we have to deliver health initiatives. With a climate emergency, we have to actually deliver green infrastructure, because the goal of us all here, despite being in very different political parties in the room, the goal is the same. We all want a healthy, green, affordable Reading to live in. We need to fight inequality in Reading, which even before COVID was sadly growing worse. And it's a shame that when taking the wording for this motion from the Fair Tax Declaration online, the Labour group chose to water down the wording, and instead of demanding to know who owns and profits from a business, instead demanding clarity where practicable. It's always practicable to demand clarity, Madam Mayor, and we don't want to see yet more words, we want to see action. There shouldn't be any get out of jail free cards like where practicable. And with that slight weakening of this motion, it sounds strongly like this will be a process that should be scrutinised through audit and governance, obviously the best committee, at some point in the near future. It's with regret this motion was a little weakened, Madam Mayor, but it has our support, and we hope it has the support of all councillors here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I now have Councillor Moore also to make a maiden speech. That is the first test. I think a colleague is helping you.
Also got a broken microphone. Oh, there we go. It's working now. Thank you. It just took a while to wake up. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very pleased to speak my first council meeting, especially on a motion that actually compels the council to take affirmative action on fair tax practices and conduct. I think a lot has been said already by both Labour and Green councillors, but I think in a cost of living crisis we're seeing right now, people paying their fair share of tax is definitely a commendable thing to take, and the council's lead on that is incredibly important. Many Telhurst residents contacted us during Fair Tax Week about this, so I'm very pleased to see this motion. In fact, it may well have been something we would have submitted ourselves if it had not been tabled, and the Lib Dem group are very, very pleased to support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Brief but effective in your maiden speech. I have Councillor Carnell next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Mpofu-Coles, for bringing this motion. This is an interesting motion, but the most intriguing element is what isn't said. The motion calls for a fair tax without really saying what a fair tax is. So let's talk about paying tax. Tax evasion is totally wrong. Nobody in this group would condone tax evasion. Tax evasion is illegal and, if convicted, rightly carries a heavy punishment. Tax avoidance is, on the other hand, legal. The Treasury work hard closing loopholes, but whilst these loopholes exist, companies and individuals are entitled to use them if they wish. They may well increase a company's profits, but profit isn't a dirty word. Pension funds invest heavily in the stock market, and these profits contribute to today's pensions. Increased profits allow companies to invest and grow, bringing job security and opportunity to their employees, a valuable commodity in these uncertain times. Continuing investment brings us a growing economy and increased productivity, which will lead eventually to real terms wage growth. So what level should a fair tax be? All evidence shows that as levels of taxation fall, the income from that tax rises. This is simply because the cost of avoidance becomes more than the tax saved. This was made abundantly clear when the Republic of Ireland cut their company tax rates. Both businesses benefited from lower tax, and the state benefited from increased tax income. We support a fair tax regime, a low and sustainable tax regime where people keep more of their money and where companies have increased funding for investment. A regime where tax avoidance is not cost effective. That is a fair tax environment that we aspire to. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Carnell. Councillor Robinson, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Firstly, may I also thank Councillor Mpofu-Coles for proposing this motion this evening. You'll be pleased to learn, keep this short, as my colleague Councillor Carnell has covered a lot of what I was going to say. The issue over the growing need for responsible tax conduct in the corporate world, and in particular the anger against aggressive tax avoidance, is one that is high in the public conscience. Whilst it can be argued that what some corporates are doing is not illegal, in my opinion, there is an ethical standpoint which needs to be addressed. It is also behaviour that in many ways undermines competition, which is essential in good business. As Councillor Mpofu-Coles states, it is estimated that over 17 billion in tax revenue is lost through tax avoidance schemes. And this is money that we as a country cannot afford to lose and should not lose. Whilst I fully understand that the need for corporates to make profits, these should not be excessive at the cost of others. We must not lose sight of the need for corporate social responsibility and the need to help and support the communities in which these corporates operate. We welcome the fair tax initiatives and the aims of the Fair Tax Foundation. We will also be pleased to support this motion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Councillor Thompson, I have you next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Mpofu-Coles, and I echo the remarks of my colleagues in support of this motion. And I also note that it is called the Fair Tax Motion, implying fairness as well as legality, even fairness, I would say, above legality, as we all know that tax avoidance causes significant losses to our economy. But I'd just like to ask, what kind of mechanism does the council have in mind, or maybe you're working on, how to measure the impact of this when it's introduced, how we can check on the due diligence we're going to be doing to check on companies and so forth?
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I have Councillor Brock to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wasn't intending to speak, but perhaps seems easiest for me to respond to Councillor Thompson. So in general, the council already complies with everything that is within this motion. You know, this is part and parcel of the way in which the council operates. It's all in conformity with the social value policy that we passed a few years ago, and it's sort of an extension of that. Really what we are here doing tonight is lending our support to the national campaign around the fair tax declaration, and importantly, with it coming down the track, at least in theory, the forthcoming revisions to UK procurement law offer an opportunity for councils to be given, and other organisations, but especially public authorities, to be given much more latitude in the way in which they procure services, would allow us to drive out far better social value in the contracts that we let. And at the moment, there are far too many restrictions upon us. So, you know, as with all things, you're of course quite welcome to ask questions in the future, see how things are going, but there will be no fundamental change in the council's practices as a result of this, because we're already doing it all. I would say, since I have the opportunity to respond to Councillor Carnell, I was glad Councillor Robinson clarified the Conservative group position. I was worried there was a sort of left-right split about to emerge within you. But it seems peculiar that Councillor Carnell is not aware that his own former Chancellor of the Exchequer yesterday launched a consultation to crack down on tax avoidance, because apparently we are far too loose, because we are as a country, on our sovereign investor tax treatment. Perhaps he should read the government's press releases on a regular basis. And he tells me that he wants low taxes, yet his government has presided over the largest individual tax burden in 70 years. Perhaps if there were not such general incompetence across government in cracking down on those who evade and avoid tax, on closing loopholes which are frankly unethical, even if they are legal, we would not require such high levels of personal taxation, which, as my colleagues on all sides have pointed out tonight, are such an unfair burden on people during this cost of living crisis. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brock. I don't believe I've seen any other indications, so I'd like to invite Dr. Councillor Mpofu-Coles to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, everybody. I think this is so important when we look in our community, specifically in Reading, in different wards, and we really, really need to try and see how we can have equality and distribution of fair through fair tax, and make sure that those in poverty, in the numbers that I've read, benefit through this things that are happening throughout the country. Thank you very much. Please vote for this motion.
Here. Oh, I'm not supposed to do that. So, councillors, I would like to move to a vote. So, all those in favour, please show. Oh, good. I don't believe that's unanimous, but was there anybody who was against? And I don't believe there were any abstentions. No. So that has been passed unanimously. So I am now, so here. That concludes our business for this evening. May I thank you for your attendance tonight and ask you to take your time in leaving the council chamber. Thank you all.